Hello, YouTube friends. Welcome, everyone. Before you get comfortable, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Also, let us know where you're watching from and what time it is there. The Listener. When Emily Shepard returned to Hollis Ridge, she knew something was wrong. Not because the road was more broken than ever, or because the wooden houses had more mold than paint. It was something deeper, something you could feel, like a tightness in your chest, a rustling in the trees, a chill in your bones, even though it was the middle of July. "Are you sure you want to stay here tonight?" asked the bus driver, an older man with sour, milk-colored eyes. "This part of Appalachia, it's not like it used to be." Emily smiled, uncomfortable. She hadn't set foot in that town for almost 20 years, ever since her mother took her away at the age of 9 without explanation, leaving everything behind: the house, the photos, even Grandpa Bernard, who disappeared weeks later without a trace. "It's only for a few days," he replied, carrying his backpack over his shoulder. The bus left, raising a cloud of reddish dust, and she was left alone at the bus stop. No one else, no cars, no dogs, no voices, just wind and that sour aroma of fermented corn, of old, damp earth. He walked to the old Shepard house at the top of the hill. It took him more than an hour up the steep path, with weeds invading the steps and branches scratching his jacket. The house was still there, intact as a tombstone. Gable roof, sloping porch, a rocking chair that creaked on its own. "Hello?" he called, more out of habit than expecting an answer. When he opened the door, the smell of confinement and mildew hit him like a slap in the face. But everything was just as he remembered it. The wallpaper with wilted flowers, the threadbare carpet, the pendulum clock that still read 3:17, even though it hadn't worked for years. He went upstairs to his old room. Everything was still there, even the drawings she had made as a child. A tall, faceless figure standing at the foot of her bed. She remembered it clearly now. It wasn't imagination, not at all. She always felt that someone was watching her at night. A presence, something whispering from the walls. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. Outside, the wind roared through the trees as if something was breathing between the branches. Inside, wood creaked. Pipes groaned as if carrying water, or voices. At 3:17 a.m., he woke up. She opened her eyes without knowing why, until she heard it. A whisper, not words exactly. It was like a mixture between a murmur and a muffled, almost childish song. It came from the attic. He climbed with a flashlight in hand. Each step squeaked as if she were complaining. When she reached the top, she stood still. There was nothing there, just dust, boxes, and an old record player. But the turntable was spinning. It was not connected. "Hello?" he murmured. The rustling stopped. Emily stepped back. The air smelled different, thicker, as if something old, very old, was there with her, exhaling just behind the back of her neck. He turned suddenly. Nothing. He ran downstairs. Sleep was impossible. In the morning he went down to town. Hollis Ridge had only one store open, and a coffee shop that looked like something out of the 1950s. The rest were boarded up windows, "For sale" signs, and people avoiding eye contact. She entered the cafeteria. The woman behind the counter recognized her immediately. "You're Lorna's daughter. Emily, right?" "Yes, I came back for a few days to understand some things." The woman was silent for a few seconds, then whispered, "Your mother left for a good thing, child. Hollis Ridge doesn't take care of her dead." Emily frowned. "What do you mean?" but the woman shook her head and poured her coffee without another word. She only added, "Don't go up the hill after sunset, and if you hear something, don't answer. Don't ever respond." Confused and somewhat annoyed, Emily returned to the house. She decided to explore the basement, which her mother had never let her go down to. The door was locked with a thick chain. She picked the lock with a rusty crowbar she found in the shed. On the way down, the air was much colder, and it smelled of iron and disturbed earth. There were old shelves, books, jars with strange substances, and a wooden chair in the center. In front of it, engraved on the floor, a circle with symbols I didn't understand. All around, drawings of hands, of eyes, of open mouths. One word stood out, engraved everywhere. "Listen." A notebook rested on the chair. It belonged to his grandfather, Bernard. Day 92. "Keep talking to me. Only to me." The whisper becomes clearer. He promises me things. He tells me I must hear and remember, that the people have forgotten, but not me. Not yet. He turned the pages, increasingly chaotic. Drawings of the tall, faceless figure, descriptions of rituals, mentions of an ancient echo that lived beneath Hollis Ridge, a moaning that feeds on the silence of men. What the hell is this? That night, he heard the whisper again, not just from the loft, but from inside the walls. And this time, the whisper said his name. "Emily." He covered his ears, but the whisper was louder inside his head. "Listen, leave me alone," he shouted, and then the whisper answered, "You already did." The lights went out. The whole house shook, and outside, the rocking chair on the porch stopped. The echo beneath the earth. The night did not end. Emily didn't sleep. She didn't even try. She sat on the sofa with the flashlight in her hand, wrapped in a filthy blanket she found in a trunk. Outside, the wind continued to move the branches violently, but it was inside the house where she felt the real danger, as if the walls breathed, as if every crack hid an eye that spied on her, as if every shadow desired her. The whisper did not return, but it left a mark, a constant ringing in his right ear, like a slight tinnitus, or a word that he did not finish pronouncing. At dawn, Emily walked to the center of town with her grandfather's journal pressed to her chest. She needed answers. In the square, he saw a group of elderly people sitting on folding chairs in front of the abandoned church. They were all silent. They were all looking at her. One of them, a man in leather and a Texan hat, stood up and walked toward her. "You shouldn't be here," he said without preamble. "Did you know my grandfather, Bernard Shepard?" The man narrowed his eyes. "Of course I met him. He was the last one to listen." Emily frowned. "Listen to what?" The man looked around, as if afraid that something might hear him. "Not here. Walk with me." He led us to an old shed next to the mill. Inside, a single light bulb hung from the ceiling, swinging. The man closed the door behind them. "Your grandfather was a good man, pastor once upon a time. But Hollis Ridge changes men. He molds them, he bends them, and when they listen, they can't stop listening." Emily showed him the notebook. He was writing about a whisper, an echo beneath the earth. Is it some kind of local legend? The man did not smile. He didn't say just stories. He didn't call her crazy. Just said, "It's not an echo. It's what's left." From what? From before. Of what was here before the town, before the roads, before even men. No one knows its real name, only that it wants to be heard, that it calls, that it murmurs, and that when you answer, it takes you inside. Emily felt a shiver run down her spine. My mother ran away without saying anything. She took me out of here. Is that why she went? Your mother listened too. One night she went down to the basement and saw what Bernard was doing. He wasn't him anymore. He was recording, murmuring into the void, offering her things. She ran away before he could. Offer her too. Emily's stomach churned. And what became of him? The man swallowed saliva. One morning he went up the hill. He said that the voice had called him to the center. No one saw him again. But since then, the whisper came back louder. Emily took a step back. I heard him last night. He said my name. I answered. The man blanched. God help us. Is there any way to stop this? To silence that thing? It was tried. In the 30s, in the 60s, in 94. They burned houses. They sealed caves. They drove away those who would listen. But it doesn't work. Because the whisper is part of the soil itself. It feeds the people. It is the only thing that holds it together. What does that mean? Everyone here knows it, and no one leaves, because if the silence is broken, if everyone listens at the same time, wake up. It rises. Emily looked at him in horror. You hear it too, don't you? The man did not answer. He only looked at her with empty, defeated eyes. Then he handed her a rusty key. Behind the church, there's an iron trap door. It was used by miners 100 years ago. It leads to the bowels, to the center. Why are you giving it to me? Because it's too late for you. You've heard it. You have only two ways. Either it consumes you, or you face it. Emily returned to the house that afternoon. The wind smelled of disturbed earth, and the sky was grayer than usual. She walked in and felt that something had changed. The pendulum clock. It read 3:17, and it was moving. He ran up to the attic. Everything was as before, except for one detail. Now there were bare footprints in the dust. Fresh, wet footprints, walking in circles. The record player was still spinning, no sound. That night, he packed his backpack and headed to church. Behind it, he found the trap door, rusty, covered with ivy. He used the key. A high-pitched squeak accompanied her as she opened it, as if the metals were weeping. A rotten smell emerged, strong, like an old corpse, like ancient damp. He descended with a flashlight and a rope tied to his waist. The stairs were made of stone and went down more than 20 meters. Then, a narrow tunnel led to a circular chamber carved into the living rock. In the center, a kind of altar. Around it, consumed candles, engraved symbols, animal bones, and human bones. And on the altar, a phonograph, working. It made a barely audible sound, as if someone was speaking, but backwards, as if an ancient tongue was coiled inside the ear. Emily felt nauseous. He went forward and touched the phonograph. As soon as he did so, the candles lit by themselves, and the whisper filled the chamber. You came back, daughter of blood. You can listen too. They sealed the mouth, but left the ear. Open it, open it, open it. The flashlight flickered. The ground shook. A fissure opened under his feet, revealing absolute darkness. Inside it, something was moving. Not with a clear shape, not with boundaries. It was a murmur made flesh, a disembodied thought. Emily shouted. She tried to run, but the rope around her waist tightened. Something was pulling her toward the crevice. She screamed louder. She clung to the walls. But the voice was now inside her head. Only one must listen. One must take us. And you answered. Before he fell, he let go of the rope. She ran down the tunnel, stumbling, scratching her arms. She came to the surface gasping for breath. Covered in dust, dirt and fear. Around them the air was thicker, and the church clock chimed. It was the first time in decades. The time was 3:17. Everywhere in town, clocks were synchronized, and for the first time since she ran away as a child, Emily understood what her mother had tried to protect. Hollis Ridge was not just a town. It was a prison built not to contain the living, but to muffle the echo of something older than the world. And now, that echo had her marked. Chapter 3. When Silence Breaks. The town was no longer sleeping. That early morning, lights flickered in every house on Hollis Ridge. Doors creaked without anyone touching them. The clocks, all the clocks, struck 3:17, an hour without logic, as if time had fractured. Emily, covered in dust and wounds, came running out from behind the church. Her breath was short, her hands trembling, and a certainty stuck in her chest. Something had awakened down there. The whisper followed her even outside the trap door. It was no longer a simple echo. It was a constant throbbing in the air, as if the town itself was breathing with a second voice, a murmur that filtered through the windows, that seeped through the vents, that vibrated in the bones. She ran to her grandfather's house. Everything was exactly as she left it, except that the hallway mirror now reflected something that was not her. A blurry, tall, faceless figure, mimicking her movements with a slight delay, as if it were learning her. Emily covered him with a sheet. He looked for his grandfather's diary. He read it in its entirety. The last pages were smudged, as if he had written them in tears. The people cannot be saved. It can only be sealed again. But each time it grows stronger. Each one who listens feeds it. Each one who fears it awakens it a little more. There is no escape, only a relay. Someone must be the new bearer, and soon it will be my granddaughter. Emily dropped the notebook. Son of a bitch, she muttered. His own blood had marked her as a sacrifice. He opened the old tool cabinet. Among dust and cobwebs, he found old dynamite, wrapped in wax paper. There were Bernard's notes, instructions for setting off the explosives, tunnel coordinates, sketches of the subway chambers. Everything pointed to the same plan, to make it all collapse. But he didn't. He never had the courage, because he already listened to him. It was no longer him. The echo had molded him inside. Emily took the dynamite. She taped the packages together, as the blueprints indicated. In her mind, the voice grew more insistent. Don't do it. Listen, Emily, we're already in you. We're already part of you. Remember that time you thought about dying? That was us. Remember when you thought you saw shadows as a child? That was us. It was us. We were always there. You don't have to suffer anymore. Just say yes. Just join in. Emily gritted her teeth. She stuffed the dynamite into her backpack. She went back down to the trap door. Now there were new marks on the tunnel walls. Claws, fingernails, ancient symbols that seemed to change a shape when you didn't look directly at them. The candles they lit by themselves the previous time were still alive, though it had been hours. In the central chamber, the phonograph no longer murmured. He sang, a primitive melody without language, vibrant, painful, like a child screaming underwater, as if a forgotten god was crying at the bottom of the world. Emily placed the explosives around the altar and the cracked floor. She used the wires she found and prepared the detonator. When she was ready, she knelt down, and then he saw it. Something was emerging from the crack. It had no definite shape. It was not a body. It was smoke. It was sound. It was solid darkness. It had mouths, yes, but also eyes that opened and closed to the rhythm of its breathing. And in the center, the face of his grandfather, deformed, pale, crying blood. Forgive me, Emily, I just wanted to silence her, but I couldn't. I'm not anymore. The creature absorbed it again, and then it spoke with its voice. Emily, if you deny us, you will be our enemy. But if you join, you will know the peace of those who listen. Emily was crying. Yes, she was afraid, but also angry. What are they? What do they want? We were before language. We are what is left of the first lament. A thought that did not find a body. And for that reason, we use yours. We only want a body, a mouth that speaks for us, a flesh that takes us into the world. Well, it won't be with me. He activated the detonator. Nothing happened. The creature laughed. The sound was like glass breaking in an old man's throat. Your grandfather designed it, but he never finished it. We protected ourselves. We learned from him. Every attempt makes us wiser. Emily looked around in despair. The tunnel was gone. The stairs she had come down were sealed. Only the chamber remained, and the crevice, which was now opening wider. An arm emerged. It was not human. It was a black, wet limb, jointed in impossible places. It touched the altar, and where it touched, the stone bled. Emily understood. I couldn't shut them up, but he could take his mouth with him. He ran to the phonograph. He lifted it. The sound changed pitch. The creature screamed, "Don't touch that. It's our apex. It's our way out." Emily stepped back, hugging the object. She climbed up the side of the crevasse. There were collapsed tunnels, but also new galleries. The creature followed her. With each step, the echo grew louder. It went up for what seemed like an hour, until he found a crack in the ceiling. Light. He knocked, shouted, he pushed. The earth gave way. He emerged in the town cemetery, covered in dust, and with the phonograph still vibrating in his arms. The sun was rising, but the town was no longer the same. The houses had their windows open, although no one had touched them. The clocks in every home stopped at 3:17. The church bells were ringing alone, and on the walls, the stone moved, as if the whole town was breathing. Emily ran to the old mill. She used the dynamite there, not to seal, but to open. The blast collapsed the walls. In the center, an old cistern, where, according to Bernard, the town's sound lines were connected. A system of acoustic tunnels that carried echoes all over Hollis Ridge. Emily threw the phonograph inside, and then the world roared. A roar went through the town. Windows exploded. The bells split. And for a second, all was pure silence. Then came the screams. People in the village began to come out of their homes. Everyone was crying. Everyone was bleeding from their ears. Everyone was repeating, "We don't hear it anymore. We don't near it anymore." The echo was gone, but something else. I had gone out with him. Emily fell to her knees. Her vision was blurring. In her ear, still a voice whispered, "Heron, you didn't kill him. You just set him free. Someone found it within a few hours. A stranger, a lost driver who didn't know what Hollis Ridge was. He called the police. Helicopters arrived. Ambulances, reporters. They did not find the tunnel. They did not find the phonograph. But the town was empty. Its inhabitants were transferred to psychiatric centers, all with a common diagnosis, collective auditory hallucinations. Except Emily. She did not speak. She just wrote. And on every page she wrote, the doctors noticed a pattern. The words vibrated, literally, as if his strokes buzzed when read. One day she disappeared from the hospital. Her body was never found. Just a note on his bed, written upside down. The echo doesn't live in Hollis Ridge. It lives in me now, and I am carrying it out into the world. Title: Whispers of Hollow Creek. Chapter 1. The Rusty Poster. The sign creaked in the dry August wind, barely held up by two rusty nails. The Welcome to Hollow Creek sign leaned over High Road 49, like an old, crooked sentinel. No one had painted it for more than 20 years, and the word welcome had already peeled off enough to seem like cruel irony. Thomas Gerard was driving his old pickup truck, with the air conditioning dead and a toolbox rattling in the back. He was 36 years old, had a teenage son named Alex, and a heart full of fresh ashes. His wife, Leah, had died suddenly 3 months ago. Brain aneurysm, silent, like a blast that leaves no warning. After the funeral, Thomas decided he could no longer stay in Portland. Everything reminded him of her: the cafes, the supermarkets, the bookstores. So he packed up what little he had, sold the house, and decided to accept an unexpected inheritance. An old cabin that had belonged to his Uncle Harold, a man he barely remembered. Route 191. No one returns from the last assignment. 1. The silence of the tire's night had fallen with a heavy blackness over the vast fields of Texas. Beyond the range of the truck's headlights, Highway 191 seemed to dissolve into a bottomless pit. It was not unusual for Efrain Salgado to drive at this hour. After 20 years as a trail driver, he had seen it all. Lonely roads, frightening accidents, men crying on the radio, and even bodies on the side of the road. But tonight, there was something different. Perhaps it was the way the assignment came to him. It wasn't his usual boss, nor a familiar dispatcher. It was a call on his personal cell phone. After midnight, a strangely formal voice offered him a double payment for a freight move from an old silo north of Marathon, Texas, to a supposedly closed refinery near Redford. No company in its right mind would send a truck down that route in the wee hours of the morning, much less with such strict instructions. No opening cargo, no stopping, no talking to anyone on the way, and never under any circumstances taking detours. And yet, Ephraim accepted, not out of courage, but out of desperation. My son needs that treatment, he muttered to himself, adjusting his knuckles on the steering wheel. It's not the first crazy thing I've done for him. The clock on the dashboard read 2:14 a.m. I had already crossed half of Route 191, an infamous stretch among truckers. Some called it the deadline. According to stories, the radios would stop working without explanation. The GPS would flicker, and sometimes you could see lights that weren't from any car. Lights that danced like bicycle headlights, but moved as if they were floating above the asphalt. 2. Something moves in the box. It was the cargo that worried him the most. The box was sealed, but not with normal padlocks, but with what looked like stainless steel seals with strange engravings. He had already felt 3 knocks since it started. They weren't like the wobbling of drums or machinery. They were more organic, as if something had been thrown against the walls from the inside. He tried to ignore it. He turned up the volume on the radio, looking for a frequency that wasn't dead. The only thing he managed to pick up was a ranchera song, interrupted by static, followed by a soft voice saying, "He's not going to make it anymore." What the fuck? He turned off the radio with a jerk. His hands were sweating. The air conditioner began to blow colder, as if the system had changed itself. Outside, The desert looked like a sheet of frozen dust. Not a soul, not an animal, not a night bird, until he saw it. 3. The figure next to the sign, 100 meters ahead, under an old rusty sign that read, Kilometer 67, Route 191. There was a human figure, standing still, not moving, like a statue that someone forgot in the middle of the road. Ephraim slowed down, rubbing his eyes. At 3:09 a.m., Ephraim spotted something he did not expect to see in the middle of the desert. A truck stopped on the side of the road. The paint was the same dull blue as his, but more deteriorated, dirtier, as if it had been under sandstorms for years. The headlights were off, the windows soaked from the inside, although there wasn't a drop of moisture outside. Slowing down, Ephraim noticed something else. The unit's number was 4317, exactly the one his former boss told him never to mention. A cursed number among old trailers. Rumor had it that this unit disappeared in 2007. It was operated by a man named Genaro Rocha. He never showed up. His truck, his cargo, his radio, everything vanished on Route 191, and yet, there it was. Ephraim hesitated. A part of him wanted to speed up, but another, the more reckless one, made him slow down. He grabbed the flashlight and got out of the truck. 5 minutes, that's all, he said to himself. He walked toward the abandoned cab. The driver's door was ajar. A dank stench akin to wet meat wafted from inside. As he peered in, his heart almost stopped. There was a logbook. The page was open, soaked in a viscous liquid, barely legible, but you could make out the last thing Genaro wrote. They won't let me open the box. They say if I see what I'm carrying, the trip is over. But something in there speaks to me. It says my name. It promises things. It says it can make me eternal. He says the route does not end in Redford. He says it never ends. Ephraim stepped back, slipping on something slimy. He looked down. It was a tongue. A human tongue, dry, black, split in 3, but with no body. He ran back to his truck. 2. The voices of the trailer. As I moved down the road, the knocking on the box turned into whispers. At first they were muffled sounds, like sobs seeping through the metal. Then they began to form words, different voices, some low, others so high-pitched they sounded like squeaks. They all said similar things to him. You won't make it. The box opens by itself. Your son already belongs to us. Keep us company, Ephraim. Just one more to go. He broke out in a cold sweat. His knuckles ached from squeezing the steering wheel so hard. He took the rosary hanging from the rearview mirror. He squeezed it tightly, but the rosary fell apart. It didn't fall, it didn't break. It turned to dust in his hand. 3. The town that does not exist. About 10 kilometers ahead, the road took him to an unexpected detour. It did not appear on his GPS or in his route memory. A makeshift, handwritten sign read, Refinery, 3 miles. Ephraim hesitated. The instructions were clear. Do not take detours. And yet the map on the board now showed that this was the shortest way. How? Who modified it? He looked back at the main road, dark, empty, alive. And then the detour. He turned. Maybe out of fear. Maybe because a voice inside his head told him that if he didn't, he would never finish the trip. 3 miles later, instead of a refinery, he came to a town, a place that should not exist. Wooden houses without windows, lighted lanterns with no visible electrical source, a bar with the word welcome written backwards, and people, motionless. People standing in silence in the middle of the street, all looking at the truck. They were dressed like trailers. One of them held up a sign, "Load empty, do not stop." Ephraim braked hard. He rolled down the window. A woman with a white face and completely black eyes approached. "What's in the box, Ephraim?" she asked in a two-tone voice, as if two people were speaking at once through her throat. "I don't know," he answered in a broken voice. "What if what you're carrying is carrying you?" Ephraim accelerated furiously. The truck rammed several of the immobile people. They did not bleed. They did not scream. They just crumbled into white powder. 4. The trail of the missing back on the main road. Something had changed. The truck's radio turned on by itself and began to emit an old audio. It was a man's voice. "Logbook of 2007. Genaro Rocha. I think this is the last thing I record. If anyone hears this, don't stop the truck. Don't look inside. Don't believe the voices. There is no refinery. There's just a stomach, a giant one, and you are the next digestion." The recording was repeated. Ephraim shouted, pounding his fists on the console, but the radio wasn't breaking. The sound was now coming from the chassis' own speakers. Then he saw it, a trail of lights ahead, flickering lights, like flares, maybe a roadblock, maybe help. He braked. He got out of the truck. He ran toward the lights, and he found photographs. Photos nailed to the ground with rusty nails. Photos of trailers. Dozens. Maybe hundreds. Some of the faces were familiar. There was one of his uncles, another of a fellow trail rider. But what sent him reeling was seeing his own face. A photo of him, with the date of that same night. He screamed. He fell to his knees. He looked back at the truck. The box was open. 5. What came out of the box? Something was emerging from the trailer. It was not a being, not quite. It was like a sack of flesh with multiple small mouths, eyes scattered where there shouldn't be eyes. But the worst thing was its voice, because he spoke like his son. "Daddy, Daddy, get me out of here." Ephraim fell backwards. The thing was sliding along the asphalt, leaving a trail of oil and blood. It advanced slowly, absorbing the light, stealing heat from the air, and after her, more came. Other figures, smaller, like deformed replicas. They were taking the photos from the floor, one by one, and devouring them. Ephraim ran to the truck. He climbed in. He closed the door. He started the truck. The box closed again on its own, with a squeak of live metal. He did not look back, just drove, no GPS, no map, no address. Route 191 was no longer a highway. It was a path to something deeper. A stomach that slowly digests those who accept that last assignment. And he still didn't know if he was escaping or reaching the end. When the clock on the dashboard read 4:44, Ephraim began to hear a new voice on the radio. This time it was not an old recording, nor a hallucination. It was a live broadcast. Unit 4317, Unit 4317, come in, said a female voice, mechanical, emotionless. Last call. You are moving out of tracking range. Repeat. Last call. Ephraim, panting, on the verge of tears, pressed the radio button. Who are you? Where are you? A silence. Then the answer. Here, where it all begins. Tell me what you saw, Ephraim. Tell me what you're carrying. I don't know what I'm carrying. I just want to get to the destination. The voice responded with inhuman calm. Destination, Ephraim. That thing you're driving is not going anywhere. The destination was miles ago. What you're doing now is digesting yourself. At that moment, the entire truck shook as if an inner force was twisting it from the bowels. The steering wheel vibrated. The seats creaked. From the box came a buzzing sound. like the screeching of insects inside a honeycomb of bones. 2. The ebb and flow of the road. The landscape began to change. There was no more desert. There was no longer any sign of civilization. The pavement became damp, like sweaty skin. The sky was perpetually red, but without sun. The edges of the road now had teeth. Not trees, not poles. Human teeth. Some giant, some tiny, growing from the earth. Some moved, chewed the air. Eadam felt something in him change. His breathing was heavier. The sweat tasted sweet, like syrup. And when he looked in the rearview mirror, he no longer had pupils. His eyes were completely white. He stepped on the accelerator. The rear box groaned. It didn't creak. It didn't squeal. It groaned. A female voice whispered, "Ephraim, don't run away. You're already in. You're already part of it." And then in front of him, he saw a figure standing in the middle of the road. It was his son, small, about 8 years old, wearing a mud-stained t-shirt and the same tennis shoes he had lost 2 years ago on a hike. He raised a hand. He smiled, and Ephraim braked with all his might. The truck slid, skidded on that meaty road. The wheels roared, smoke billowed from the engine. But when he finally stopped, the boy was gone. There was only a mirror, a huge mirror in the middle of nowhere, reflecting not the truck, but the open stomach of a creature. And inside was him, sleeping, trapped. 3. Final digestion. He returned to the wheel, trembling. The tachometer was reversed. It was now reading negative numbers. The air inside the truck was thick. The walls were slowly melting. From the speakers came sounds of laughter, mixed with baby cries. He tried to open the door and jump out, but the doorknob, it had an eye, and it was looking at him. "Why is this happening to me?" He shouted into the void. "Why me?" A voice from the box answered him. "Because you accepted without asking. Because you signed without reading. Because the road needs new drivers. And you, Ephraim, you always wanted to get lost. Isn't that right?" The road was transformed into an organic tunnel. The sky collapsed. Everything was muscle. Everything was tongue. Everything was digestion. The circle of lost drivers. At the end of the tunnel, a metal structure appeared. It looked like a gas station. It had lights. It had pumps. But instead of gasoline, they dripped blood. Trucks were stopped. Dozens. Each one with open doors. Each with a name on the cabin. And Ephraim, when he looked, saw that everyone had his. They all said Ephraim Morales, with different dates of birth, different photos. It was as if 1,000 versions of him had made this same journey. And none returned. A man got out of one of the trucks. He was dressed just like him, but with a half-melted face. He smiled. "Welcome, brother. At the end of digestion, here we are, all trailers of the last order. Here we live in eternal transit. Here no one returns." Ephraim wanted to run, but the ground caught him. It wasn't dirt. It was muscle. It embraced him. It squeezed him. He pulled it inside him. 5. The stomach of the roads inside the box. He saw it, at last. The order. It was a heart. Not a human one. It was gigantic, pulsating, covered with letters in ancient languages. Arteries were connected to the sides of the trailer. It was what gave it movement. Every heartbeat pushed the engine. And around the heart, there were bodies. Bodies of trailers fused to the chassis, mouths sewn shut, eyes open, hands tied to the metal. Some were still breathing. Ephraim fell to his knees. A voice came into his head. His voice, but another version of him. "You finally understood. We are not drivers. We are parts of the organism. We are its legs, its skin, its oil, its lungs. I I don't want to be part of this, he whispered. You already are. You always were. Ever since you entered 191. Ever since you accepted without asking. Since the world stopped being asphalt and became intestine. 6. Eternity in transit. When he woke up, he was back behind the wheel. The truck was moving by itself. The sky was black. The asphalt was alive. An old song was playing on the radio. A female voice was singing something like a lullaby. The box no longer knocked. It only whispered. Ephraim no longer needed to eat, nor drink, nor sleep. Just driving. And I knew that ahead at some impossible curve, another detour would await. Another mirror, another familiar face, another heart to give, and another unsuspecting person who accepts the order without asking. Trail riders crossing the state of Nevada often talk among themselves about certain rest stops along Interstate 80. One in particular is always mentioned with a hint of discomfort, as if they don't quite know whether to remember what they saw there, or whether they dreamed it. It is called Service Area 34B. It does not appear on official maps. It's not on Google Maps. But it does show up sometimes when the truck's GPS fails, or when you stop to rest on the deserted stretch between Winnemucca and Battle Mountain, just after a sharp turn that the locals call the Devil's Gut. And that's what happened to Julio Caballero, a Mexican truck driver who'd been driving in the United States for more than 15 years. Julio was one of those who avoided truckers' radios and WhatsApp groups where legends were shared. He said that nothing scared him except running out of gas in the middle of nowhere. But that night, fear found another way in. One, the invisible detour. It was the third night in a row that I had driven without stopping to do more than pee and stretch my back. He was hauling a load of heavy machinery from Sacramento to Cheyenne and was already more than halfway through the trip. The sun had long since gone down, and the moon was barely a curved shell overhead. Sleep was starting to hit him hard. He rubbed his eyes. The road was an endless straight line. Every so often a sign would pass by that seemed to repeat itself. Gas and rest area 2 miles ahead. Then came another one that read, Service Area 34B. Julio frowned. I don't remember seeing that one before, he muttered. He thought about passing by, but his stomach growled. He had a strange craving for machine coffee and stale muffins, things that only taste good at midnight. As soon as he took the designated exit, a strange silence enveloped him. The noises of the truck, the vibration of the engine, even the hum of the air conditioning seemed to fade away, as if someone had turned down the volume of the world. The exit ramp was dark, with no lights. The pavement had deep cracks, and weeds ate away at the edges. About 50 meters away, the figure of a rest station appeared. A diner-type restaurant, an old gas pump with only one pump, and in the background, a restroom building with fogged-up windows. It looked uninhabited, but not abandoned, as if someone had cleaned it just a few hours ago, but no one was working there. Julio turned off the engine. The silence was so thick that I felt the pressure in my eardrums. 5 minutes, he said, and went downstairs. 2, the 3 faces in the window. He walked toward the diner. The lights were on inside. There were tables with folded napkins and cups set out. A neon sign was flashing above the door, open. But upon entering, he found no one. Not a waiter, not a cook. Just that smell of overheated coffee and old grease wafting in the air. He advanced with a slow step. as if he did not want to wake something up. He sat down at one of the tables in the back, the one closest to the window. From there, he could see his truck parked under the dim yellowish light of the solitary pole. And then he saw them, 3 faces, 3 figures attached to the outside glass of the bathroom, on the other side of the rest area. 3 people standing completely still, looking at him from a distance. They did nothing. They did not move. Julio blinked. When he looked again, they were gone. He got up abruptly and left the diner. But when he opened the door, he found a different night. The moon had disappeared. The lights in the rest area were off. The air was thicker, with an aroma of rotting earth. His truck was still there, but something was dripping from the driver's door. Something dark. She ran to him. Julio didn't know at what point she started screaming. He only remembers his hands shaking, his fingernails tearing the bathroom floor, and his breath coming in short gasps. The photograph was still there, in front of him, like an open trap, an image of him sleeping in his own truck, with an impossible figure behind. The shadow with bandages, the one with the rusty key. The cubicle doors, all of them, open slowly. No noise, without startle, as if the hinges knew that true terror creeps in silently. Julio backed up until he bumped into the sink. Objects merged from inside each cubicle. Not people, not figures. Things. Strange, rusty things. A muddy child's shoe. A cap with dried blood on it. A notebook with names crossed out. A bone. Another one, a broken backpack, and a radio transmitter that suddenly turned on. From him came a muffled voice with a Kansas accent. Area 34B, Area 34B. This is truck 712. If anyone hears this, please. I am no longer on the map. The night is not progressing. Something got into my cabin. Then, static. Julio threw the device away as if it was burning. He staggered out of the bathrooms. The air outside was not much better. Thicker, denser. The sky, once showing stars, was now a sheet of motionless black clouds. He ran to his truck, but he wasn't. In its place was another truck. Same model, same color, but covered with rust, with plates from 20 years ago. The cab, wide open, keys hanging by a bloody thread. Chapter 1. Lights in the rearview mirror. There was something about Texas highways that never quite felt human. The sun would leave without a word, and as soon as the last orange light faded over the horizon, the highways would begin to mutate. Straight, empty lines stretched out like sleeping snakes, and any sign of life seemed swallowed up by the desert dust. It was 2:13 a.m. when Joel Calderon, a truck driver with more than 20 years on wheels, passed the rusty sign announcing Kilometer 237. There was nothing particularly special about that stretch, or so he thought, but the sign had a peculiarity. It looked new, as if someone had put it up that very afternoon. It gleamed with an impossible white paint under the dim light of its headlights. Joel was driving a red Kenworth with a refrigerated trailer loaded with frozen meat, bound for El Paso. The radio hissed a mix of static and sad country, and the night weighed on his eyes like a wet blanket. He was sleepy, but he couldn't stop. The last rest stop had been at an unnamed station some 120 miles back, and he didn't want to risk delaying the load. As his fingers drummed on the steering wheel, the old CB began to hum. Somebody copy me. Joel frowned and leaned toward the device. This is Toro 18. I hear you. Who's out there? Nothing. Just the electric chirp that sometimes arose when the weather interfered. The sky was clear, no storms in sight. Probably another guy playing, he muttered to himself. 15 minutes passed in absolute silence. Joel kept his eyes firmly on the white line to the right, using the edge of the road as an anchor to keep from falling asleep. It was then that he noticed something in the rearview mirror. 2 lights, headlights coming from behind, at a safe distance but clearly faster than him. That was strange. The road had been deserted for hours. He checked his speedometer, 63 miles per hour. If they were going to pass him, they would soon. He adjusted his side mirror and waited for the vehicle to pass him. But the headlights were not coming. What the hell? 5 minutes passed, 10, and the lights were still there. No closer, no farther away. Always in the same spot, as if they were floating in a parallel dimension. Joel swallowed. He slowed down a little. He waited for the other truck to do the same, or pass him. Nothing. He looked again, but this time the headlights were not in a straight line. They were high, as if they weren't coming from a car, but from something suspended in the air behind the trailer. Joel blinked. A helicopter? No way. There was no sound. And besides, the lights weren't moving. They were just there, watching him. He retook the CB. This is Toro 18. Does anyone else see those lights in the back? Is anyone on 385 south? Silence. A minute later, a voice emerged. A raspy old voice, as if worn by the sand of time. You're already in the dead end, Toro. Don't look again. If you see them 3 times, they follow you. Joel froze. Who the hell are you? It doesn't matter. Just listen. If you look a 3rd time, there's no turning back. I did it, and now I drive alone. Forever. Joel dropped the microphone. His heart was pounding. The voice faded without a goodbye. He looked at his mirror again. The lights were still there. 2nd time. Don't be an idiot, Joel. He's just another truck driver, he said aloud, but his own voice trembled. He turned up the radio. He tuned in to an evangelical station. A female voice was saying something about the end of time, about the hour of darkness, about men disappearing on the roads. Joel changed the channel. The lights would not go out. After a couple of miles, he spotted an exit, an old roadside diner with a couple of yellow lights flashing and a rusty truck parked outside. It didn't show up on his GPS. Maybe a coffee will wake me up, he said, unconvinced. He turned. Instantly, the lights in the mirror disappeared. Joel stopped the truck and stood for a minute in absolute silence. Not a sound, no crickets, no wind. Not a sound. The restaurant was called Diner 237. So was the kilometer. The facade was dusty, as if it hadn't been touched in years, but the lights were on. He got out of the truck and noticed that the rusty old truck had no tires. It was sunk into the ground, covered in cobwebs. He opened the door of the shop. A bell rang. The place was empty. A curly-haired waitress with a stained apron looked at him from behind the counter. She didn't smile. "Coffee?" said Joel. "Sure, honey," she replied, but her voice sounded hollow, as if coming from an antique speaker. Joel sat at a table. Everything smelled musty and disused. On the wall there were pictures of truck drivers, men in plaid shirts, weathered faces, smiling. One of them looked like him. "How long has this place been open?" The waitress left the cup on the table. She did not answer. Joel looked at her, confused. Her eyes were very black.